Hello everybody, welcome back to another book-related video here on my channel. Today we are doing June's wrap-up, and also if I read all of my TBR from last month. Spoiler alert, I did. I read every single book on my TBR, but it was also not that many books. I don't have a TBR for next month. I probably won't have a TBR for next month because I ended a series and now I'm very confused on what books to read next. And also we are going book shopping for my anniversary. It was actually for June 15th, but my husband was on a trip, so pretty much the second half of July we will probably go book shopping, and I get to spend about $90 to $100 on books. So stay tuned for that video eventually, but otherwise let's go ahead and hop into our wrap-up. First, at 273 pages, I read Darkwood. This is technically a reread from, I think, middle school. I rated this one 4 stars. It was a very simple, fast, pretty read, and I didn't know what book to necessarily pick up since I was in the middle of a series, and I didn't want to start a new series, so I grabbed this one just to reread it because it used to be one of my favorite books, but at the same time, I couldn't hardly remember a lot of what happened, so I reread it. It's basically about this girl who is living with her aunt and uncle. Her father, her mother, and also her sister all died, and then all of a sudden she gets sold to what they call is the drop, where she has to go and mine for jewels and other things because that is their currency pretty much, and she escapes the drop. There is just so much action in this book and a little bit of twists and turns. It's also more fiction fantasy, so the ending is one of those that really ties everything up, but also since it's fantasy, it's very different than what you probably expected. So this was a nice little reread, and this is what I started off June with. Then at 418 pages, I read The Identicals by Ellen Hildebrand, and this is about two twins who basically switch islands. They're discovering each twin's secret and also trying to live with that. All of their past is coming up a little bit, and they then, after hating each other, they then eventually come together, and it was a pretty decent read. I already said multiple times how I did not appreciate the lack of morals that both of the sisters had or didn't have, just because of some of the things that went on. There is cheating in this book, but it's not normal just cheating on your boyfriend. It's cheating on your boyfriend while also helping some guy cheat on his wife type situation. So there's, like I said, a lack of morals, and I don't appreciate that. I also don't like a lot of the woke type politics that Ellen Hildebrand always throws in there, even if it's characters that are only 1 to 2 sentences in the book. Like I said before, it's not enough to ruin the whole book, and I did rate this one 4 stars because even though it took me, I don't know, 50, 100 pages to get into, once I was into the book, I really was into it, and I didn't necessarily want to put it down, and there was just some things that just kept happening that made me want to read a whole nother chapter or to the whole nother part, since technically they're not actual chapters, like they're not divided like a normal chapter would be. They just have like a little bit of space, and then they say whoever's point of view. It wasn't a bad book. I actually enjoyed it, just for the lack of morals and the lack of characters. I wasn't completely big on it. Then at 652 pages, we have Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, and this book was a 5-star read. This is my second book in the series that was a 5-star read, and let me just tell you, this book was so amazing. I do love it. I used to hate, well, not hate, I just didn't like the later on in the series movies as much, just because of the certain things that happen to certain people. But in this book and all the rest of the books, I really appreciate the end books a lot more than I ever did, and it also helped open my eyes more. So when my son and I rewatched all of the movies after I would finish a book, I got to understand a lot more. Even though I've already seen the movies 20 or so times, this was just my first time reading the whole series, and I don't care what you say, if you haven't read Harry Potter, you probably need to, because it is honestly one of the best. You get to grow with Harry as he goes on through the years, and it's just so good to honestly read about. There is so much stuff that happens in every single book, but mainly as you go on down the line. I feel like the third book is really the one that starts turning, but that might be because I'm biased, because that used to be my favorite movie, and it was kind of my favorite book at the time. Like I said, I did rate this one 5 stars, and I was happy to only have 2 more books left in the series if you count The Cursed Child. Then for a little break in between the Harry Potter series, at 308 pages, I did pick up The Devil Takes You Home. This I found at a store behind the thrift store on Base, so this was a free book, and it is a August 2022 book of the month. But I will say this book took me through different feelings overall, and at the end of the book, it also proves when I was doing my vlogs and my mid-year wrap-up, I talked about how this book was messing with the devil, and in all reality, it truly was. At the end of it, it talked about it. This is a horror fiction thriller type book, and I did not know that going into it. I thought it was just going to be some guy's fiction life. This guy, after losing his daughter to leukemia, he is in debt, and there's something that goes on with his wife, and she leaves him, and then he goes and seeks out this guy that he used to work with in insurance, and they become, because he was a drug dealer. They become this brand duo to go and take out a couple people, and he ends up taking a job with that guy, and that job is to steal from the cartel, one of the cartels, with the other cartel. So they're working with one cartel to steal other things from a cartel. The only thing that I was not prepared for was about, I think it was 80 pages into the book, they stopped to go pray, and I think they're around San Antonio in Texas. They're on their way to Mexico, and for whatever reason, they go into this place, they meet this girl, and they end up witnessing, or mainly the main character, because the other guy already knew about it, the main character ends up witnessing a child. In my mind was 12 or 14, but he just was talking about a child. That child was mutilated while already being born, a little bit messed up, and there's just certain things that happen, and then the older woman who mutilated that child decided to take what she took off of him and pray, and while she was praying, crosses on the wall in the room over, and it was a whole room full of crosses. They were sitting there shaking, and then at the end of the book, they also talk about how they were walking side by side with apparently God and then also the devil, but in reality, I'm pretty sure they were just walking with the devil, and it was a little bit messed up. I'm not gonna lie, this one had me feeling a little bit different, just because normally any thriller or horror I ever read, I don't get grossed out, and I think it was only because it was a child, and that one really messed with me, and also it's just really messed up to be dealing with the devil. Help me out of anything when it comes to that. So this book overall, just because of how I felt, it was kind of interesting. Like, I kept wanting to read it, and I read it pretty quickly, but I wasn't necessarily overall sure of the whole story, and there was a lot of political slams in this book, talking about people who only want to own guns. They call themselves patriots, but in reality, they're racist, you know, little slams left and right. So there was a lot of things that factored into me wanting to rate this 3 stars, but then after I started thinking about it, after a couple days, I honestly think this book is a 2-star read for me. Wasn't necessarily fond of it, even though I was flipping pages because it seemed kind of intriguing. And then of course, on the 29th of June, I finished a 759 page book, and it is Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. And let me just tell you, this book, absolutely amazing. I loved it, 5 stars, just like the rest. It was so amazing, and I was so happy to read this book, but I'm also a little bit sad to be done with Harry Potter. It is a little bit sad, but at the same time, it was so good. The things that happen to certain people is also sad, but reading this versus picturing the movie was really nice. For the most part, it was very, very similar to the movie. There were some things that were quite different, but overall, it was so similar, especially when you take into account how movies never portray how the books are. All of these movies were actually very accurate compared, and overall, 5 stars. Like I said, Harry Potter is probably one of the best movie franchise and now book franchise that I've read and watched. And then on the very last day of June, I read 308 pages, and I was expecting this book to be an add-on. I honestly thought it was maybe Lupin's kid, and it is Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, and I have to say, I am overly disappointed about this book. I agree with people when they say all good things have to come to an end. I agree that maybe you should let things be left alone. That's this book. I think that J.K. Rowling and whoever else helped make this book, I think that they should have never made it. They didn't portray Harry or Hermione or Ron or anybody else pretty much. I feel like Draco would have been the only one who was portrayed more accurate, and the kid was actually Albus Severus Potter, who was Harry's middle child. And I think, you know, it's okay to have a rebelling kid. Kids sometimes rebel, but the point that they did in this book, which they tried to make it more of a heartfelt thing, I don't think it was done very good. It's also in the format of a skit, and apparently all of the books for the Cursed Child are in the format of a play. So it was kind of annoying to kind of read it, but at the same time it helped fly through. Like, I read 308 pages in probably honestly 2 hours, which that doesn't seem accurate, but sometimes the chapters were only like a page, and then there was like the parts, so you're skipping a lot of pages, and it was just nice to finish it because I didn't think I was going to finish it, but I was also very upset with how this whole book ended up. I thought it was going to be so much better, and when I was reading the Deathly Hallows, it made sense that it could possibly be Lupin's kid, because that makes total sense if you've read the series, and I have never read what this book was about, so I was going into this blindly because I didn't want to spoil anything for this book. There are some things that would have been, I think, a good second off from the series, instead of how the this is book 8 in the series. I think making a series that was similar but completely on its own, like maybe 2 or 3 books. I don't think it needed to be a really long series. 2 or 3 books would have been a fine series if they would have done more information and if they would have went about it a different way. But like I said, how they went about it, I just was not a big fan of it, and this was my disappointment. And of course, I ended June on the very last day with one of the most disappointing books, honestly. It's kind of sad, to be honest. Last month, my TBR was just these 3 Harry Potter books, and it was mainly to see if I could read at least one a month, but potentially finish them. I was not expecting to finish 2 of them in a month, let alone all 3 of them, especially this one in one sitting. I did complete my TBR, but like I said, there's not that many books, and it is a lot of page numbers. Each one is 600-700 pages, except for this one is 300. So we were reading over 1,000 pages, which was pretty nice. That is all the books that I read in the month of June. I'm hoping to get back out of my slump because I was in a slump for the last couple months. I haven't been reading very much. This month I've read actually very well, considering the fact that I used to only read a book a month, maybe 2. So I'm getting out of my slump a little bit more, and I'm hoping that when I go book shopping and we film that, and after I do my big book haul that already I have 22 books sitting waiting for that, hopefully after all that, hopefully I can get out of my slump and I can read some really good books. I do have a series that I am wanting to start, but I don't know if I want to start it now or wait till later, and that's where I'm at. Thank you all so much for watching this video. I hope you guys all enjoyed my little wrap up. Stay tuned for any upcoming videos, especially that massive book haul and also the vlog of us book shopping. I hope to see y'all next week, and God bless.